All right, hello everybody again. Welcome back. Excellent. Welcome to AlzTalk, our first experiment in providing you new and innovative ways of getting information. We hope it's been great so far. I have Taylor Penvose coming up from Arden Courts, one of the premier Alzheimer's and memory care facilities in the country. They are also one of our major sponsors for today. If you would please give her a big round of applause for her presentation. Thank you.
Hello, thank you so much. I'm glad to be here today. Some of the things that I'm going to be talking about today are what happens when there's a crisis. And I'm going to share with you a couple of family stories that I have seen over the years. I've been working with Alzheimer's and dementia residents for 17 years, and I wish I would have kept track about how many crises I've seen. Many families do not prepare for a crisis, and a crisis never happens Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. So you have to know who you're going to call when that crisis happens at midnight or 2 in the morning. Who are you going to go to? Who's going to help you? The first story I have of a crisis is a situation of a lady named Colleen. And Colleen's situation, it wasn't just a crisis that involved her. It involved her husband, it involved her out-of-town daughter, and it involved the facility that I work at, Arden Courts, as well as a hospital, the police department, Department of Children and Families. There's so many people that surround a crisis. Colleen was a walker. She walked her entire life. She enjoyed walking. It was her hobby. She walked 10 miles a day, religiously every day. So it was no surprise when Colleen developed Alzheimer's or dementia that she started walking out of the house. For a while, her husband would actually follow her with the car to make sure that she was safe. But you can't watch somebody 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and make sure that they're safe that entire time. So it was no surprise when she started wandering out of the house more. In her situation, she wasn't really wandering, she wanted to go for a walk. The unfortunate part of this story is that she couldn't find her way home. So when that happened a few times, they did have to get the authorities involved. The police department had to come out. Unfortunately, in this situation, she ended up in a hospital in the psych unit, and that was not the right place for somebody with Alzheimer's or dementia. Just because she wandered away did not mean that this lady needed to be put in this situation. Again, the crisis was of her husband, her out-of-town daughter, and everybody else. So luckily, we were able to accommodate Colleen, and she was able to move into our facility, and she's in a safe place. There was no way that she was in a safe place prior to that. The really sad part of the story is because the authorities wouldn't let her go home one more time, she never got to go home and spend one more night with her husband in their home. So think about the crisis on the end of the husband. He had to adapt to life on his own. He had to adapt to life with his wife living in a facility. And the out-of-town daughter had to come into town and deal with dad, again, adapting to being alone, and then the mom living in a facility. So luckily, this crisis, there was a good outcome because she found a good place, but there's not as many decisions when there's not proper planning. The second story I have is of a lady named Emily. And you'll find, as I tell you this story, that there was a couple mistakes on our part, which is normal. This could happen. But the first time I met Emily, my nurse and I went to go out and assess her to see if it was time for her to come to Arden Courts. So we went to go meet Emily, and when we got to her condo, it was the first time I had been there. It was a beautiful condo in St. Pete. She was so well kept. She was beautiful. She told me she had just gone out for a nice walk on the beach, and I believed everything she told me. We then went to lunch with her and her daughter-in-law at her favorite restaurant, where her favorite waitress worked. This was a huge mistake, because all she had to do was tell the waitress that she wanted to order the usual. And the waitress knew what that meant because it was the same waitress that she saw pretty much every other day. So after the lunch, I talked to the family and I said something I'd never said before. I told them it's just not time yet. I think that she's in a great situation. Let's wait a little bit longer and we'll keep assessing the situation. Well, I got a call from the family. One thing I didn't include is that while we had the lunch, we learned a lot about Emily, and one of the big things she really liked was men and gambling. So I got a call from the family, and the family shared with me that she had taken a cab from St. Pete to Hard Rock. And so that's when I realized I had made a big mistake, and it was time for placement. So if anybody's touring an assisted living facility or an assisted living for memory care, there's a reason you're touring. You don't just wake up one day and say, I want to go tour memory care. So she moved in shortly after that, and the day she moved in, she said to me, she did not remember our lunch, but she said to me, she said, I cannot stay here all day. I have a date tonight. And I said, well, what's his name? And she said, honey, I don't know his name. So she definitely needed a secure environment. And given this situation, she was very, very vulnerable, living on her own. People could come to her door. She could let them in. She was very friendly, so she probably would have let anybody in. And thank goodness that that cab driver didn't take advantage of her. Thank goodness that somebody else at the Hard Rock didn't take advantage of her. So lesson learned. The third story I have is about somebody that did pre-plan. Marilyn's family came in 2.5 years before she moved into Arden Courts. And a year after that initial visit, they put down a move-in fee to place her on the waiting list so that if there was a crisis, they knew where they would take her. Now, she did need some assistance at home. She was living on her own. She would put things in the microwave that shouldn't go in the microwave and turn it on. But the family wasn't at the point where they thought it was time. So we developed this relationship with the family where we talked quite often. Well, they wanted to try to get Marilyn to my building, but not know that this is where she could potentially live. So they brought her for a art benefit. And she came as an attendee. She enjoyed the art. She looked around. She had some hors d'oeuvres. And it was great. I would say 2 months later, she did actually move in. And the first thing she said was, wow, gosh, I feel like I've been here before. So it was a great situation because we were able to plan the way that she was going to properly move in. The family planned, so they had a plan of action. They had home care in there until she moved in. And they had a relationship with us, as well as other professionals in the field, to help her if there was a crisis. At this point in time, Colleen wanders our gardens every day. I always say I want to put a pedometer on her because she walks more than I do. Emily has a best friend that she walks around and holds hands with, and she's in activities all the time. And then Marilyn also has a best friend, and their responsibility is to fill the bird feeder daily. They also walk around, they do the gardening, they're engaged. So all of these people have the socialization that they didn't have prior. And so the number one question that I ask families when I'm meeting with them is, what are you waiting for? What brought you here today? What are you waiting for in building relationships with people? And everybody always says a crisis. And so I tell people, don't wait for a crisis. There's no cost to build a relationship. There's another lady that ended up missing in a car for 3 days. 3 days she was missing. By the time the authorities got to her, she was Baker acted. It was a crisis situation, and families don't have choices in those moments. There's not a lot of choices. So I really do recommend building those relationships with professionals, asking the right questions, and just like you're doing today, get out there and get educated. So thank you very much.